All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be jumping into the first look build here for week 4. We'll be touching on my favorite values and core plays here as well. Let's go and get into it. But first, just a quick recap from last week's first look build. You know, the pieces were in place here, I would say for sure. Rams D, the lowest price defense that wouldn't go negative. They end up scoring 3. Dak, they kind of mentioned quarterback-wise, it didn't really matter. Obviously it matters in retrospect, but even up until lineup lock, you kind of just plugged and play. I ended up on a lot of Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts, which didn't really work out, and then also Lamar Jackson. Jordan Mason, Devon Achane, they were kind of chalk disappointments, but they were the correct chalk, I would say. The player that I ended up getting on a lot more ended up being Zach Charbonnet. Once it was confirmed Kenneth Walker was out, at the time of doing the video, it seemed like Tajay Spears would be out. Thus, I didn't mind Tony Pollard. Thankfully, Tajay Spears sat out because Tony Pollard and the Titans were terrible. From there, obviously, Juwan Jennings was a player that I was going to be on a bunch last week and did end up on him a bunch. Devonta Smith got out with a concussion. That was unfortunate. And then CeeDee Lamb, he kind of had a disappointing game. Thankfully, he was someone that I wasn't able to get to a lot, which ended up being a good thing. But looking at this week, it started out as a week in which I wasn't that excited about it. And then after watching some film, I'm about halfway through with the film, looked through all the data from last week as well. I think we're able to come up with a lot of good plays for this week. So let's jump into them. We'll start out with the running back position. So in the running back position, obviously Saquon Barkley is going to be in a good spot. They're going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He might be in for a heavier workload as well, just given the fact that Devonta Smith could now be out with a concussion. Such a dirty play as well. Just ugly play there. It should have been blown dead, but they could be without A.J. Brown and also Devonta Smith, which could mean more targets to Saquon Barkley. At the same time, that might just lead to the Tampa Bay defense being able to kind of key in on the run game a little bit more. But he is someone that I think we should be going out of our way to target. From there, JT does get a more difficult matchup. Alvin Kamara does get a more difficult matchup as well. For what it's worth, guys, I do think Taysom Hill being out for the Saints there, I think it's a little bit of a bigger deal than people might have really realized. He kind of makes the offense go in a weird way. So from there, who do I want to get to? I don't mind Breece Hall. I don't mind Bijan Robinson. But again, I really like Kyren Williams this week again. So for the 4th straight week, I'll be on Kyren Williams a decent amount. He'll be someone I am going out of my way to target. I mentioned that he would be a good play last week. That ended up being true. 3 touchdowns. I was actually a little bit surprised, though, by his work in the passing game. Only 2 targets. He caught all 2 receptions. And that was just because he was feasting on I shouldn't say feasting on the ground, but it was Sean McVay was making it clear that he did want to rush the football a lot. And it was working. 3.7 yards per carry, that's not a lot, but when you factor in, goal line work and short yardage situations, it was actually a much better day than I would say it is on paper in terms of yards per carry. Not really the best stat, yards per carry, guys, but if he's going to continue to get that workload as we totally expect him to, in a better matchup going against the Chicago Bears, I would say, maybe a push going against the Bears, Kyren Williams to me is going to be a staple this week as well. Now, I tend to spend a little bit more time on the running back position because we typically have a lot of good plays, and that is going to be the case again this week. So looking at it, Jordan Mason probably still going to be the RB1 in this offense. CMC's in Germany right now as I'm recording this, trying to look at a specialist. For what's worth, guys, Elijah Mitchell, if he's available on your fantasy football leagues, on your waiver wire, maybe you have an IR spot or something like that, or maybe a roster spot, you have deep leagues, probably worth a pickup if you can make that work, just because it's no harm, no foul. I do expect Jordan Mason to still be the guy when Elijah Mitchell gets back, but CMC could be out for a decent amount of time, it seems like, and maybe Mason with this heavy workload ends up being injured. But looking at Jordan Mason this week, still got over 20 opportunities in a decent matchup going against the Patriots. And we just saw the Jets kind of had their way with that Patriots defense. Now, I would say that's probably more due to a short week. It kind of seemed like the Jets were more prepared for the short week than the Patriots. But at the same time, 20 opportunities for Jordan Mason. It's not like he was really a letdown last week. If that's his floor, 20 opportunities, 10 fantasy points, I love that. The biggest concern with Jordan Mason is on top of Deebo Samuel still being out, probably George Kittle being out as well, we're looking at Brock Purdy, who is citing a back injury now. So that could make the offense even a little bit more hesitant there. I'm assuming Brock Purdy's good to go, but that could be a concern for us as well. I still really love Jordan Mason this week. He did what we would want him to do last week, just not enough so. But really the core play that everyone's going to be on is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. little bit annoying. I was on Austin Eckler a decent amount in DFS on Monday for both the 2-game slate and also the showdown slate. If you guys watched my NFL props video on that, you probably caught wind of that as well. A little bit annoying. I was hoping to tie a bunch of people in a GPP for first place like I did on Thursday. The Austin Eckler kind of sunk that ship, sunk the possibilities of that, which was a little bit annoying. But Brian Robinson, he would be probably, I would say, $500 to $600 more expensive if the salaries came out a little bit later. With the Austin Eckler injury, I think we can expect Brian Robinson Jr. to just get a healthy workload, but not only a healthy workload, we should expect him to get a decent amount of targets in that game. So Austin Eckler had 2 targets, had a couple of big gains in there. And so if you just take maybe 2 more points to him in receptions, and then maybe, I don't know, let's say 15 points, like that's kind of huge for him, especially at this price tag, especially in this matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, which is a pretty easy matchup on paper. Brian Robinson Jr. ended up with 76% of the carries or 76% of the snaps in week 3. This is a game where maybe they're going to be playing with the lead. We'll see. Don't exactly like the fact that it's going to be a short week with a rookie quarterback, but it is what it is. For what it's worth, I don't hate the amount of work that Carson Steele got. I didn't think he looked terrible. If he's going to get 19 opportunities in the game with the Kansas City Chiefs against the Chargers, which could be a low-scoring game, it's probably going to be a ground-and-pound type game. I don't mind the idea of like stacking Steele with the KC defense. I think that could be sneaky good. And then I also really love Zach Moss this week. I'm kind of on the borderline of making him a core player or not. Zach Moss is extremely appealing, mostly due to the price point. To be honest, 5.9 is simply too cheap. Again, I think had the pricing come out, a little bit later on, maybe today, Zach Moss would probably be a little bit more expensive because he ended up having a very big game against Washington. 6 targets in that game, 5 receptions in that game, pretty huge. Zach Moss also ended up with 76% of the workload at the running back position. Chase Brown was still kind of an afterthought. Chase Brown looked good, don't get me wrong, but that's not going to say like Zach Moss didn't look good. Zach Moss looked great as well. That's a good problem to have there for Cincinnati. Until we see Chase Brown really eat into the snaps of Zach Moss, I think we can just kind of treat Zach Moss kind of as Joe Mixon in this offense because he's kind of done a good job of replicating Joe Mixon. And so I kind of just want to be on Zach Moss a decent amount this week. And so kind of for this build process, let's say Smith and A.J. Brown are both out, I'd be happy to just go with Moss. Maybe a little bit worried that Barkley could be in a spot where he gets too much defensive attention. So with that, let's go ahead and jump on into the receivers here. I just had the 9-to-5 cheat sheet pulled up, just showing you guys who are projected to be the top scoring receivers on the slate. I would say no surprises. You got Justin Jefferson. Maybe that could be a defensive struggle between the Packers and the Vikings, two defenses that have both been pretty darn impressive. You got Jamar Chase going against Carolina. I do think we want to be targeting that. Jamar Chase was on the field basically every single snap, got a high target share. They're probably going to make him a focal point in that game again, simply because they need to win. They're 0-3. That's a game that they have to have. In games where you have to have, I tend to target the players that are star players. He is one of those star players. Now, on that point, I want to talk about T. Higgins as well. So whether or not you think T. Higgins is a star player, I would say that is up to debate. T. Higgins certainly looked good, though, last week, I thought. So 6 targets in that game, 3 receptions, almost had a nice toe tap. I was actually on him for the under receiving yards. It was like 45, I think what it was, or I think it was like 46.5. His line was, and I told people to choose there's a bunch of slightly different lines between different sports books. I told people to go with the under at 44.5, which ended up working out. That felt lucky. That did, because he ended up playing much more than I thought he would. He ended up playing like 90% of the snaps, which was shocking. And I was really shocked at how good he looked. Like in comparison to Brandon Ayuk, who he wasn't really on a snap count in week 1, but you talk about someone kind of returning to an NFL game, being kind of out of the game shape, if you will, which I do think is the thing. T. Higgins certainly looked good. It didn't seem like he lost a step at all. And so I really like the pricing here on T. Higgins. Like if we are going to play Jamar Chase, might as well go with T. Higgins, especially if he's going to get 6 targets. And he might even get more than that in this game. But I wouldn't exactly treat him as a core play. I just think at that pricing, he is certainly looking like a great value this week now. So I'm on the assumption that Deebo Samuel's not going to play this week, currently doubtful. And I'm also going to assume that George Kittle is not going to play as well. So to me, that does make me want to go to both Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings again. So I kind of mentioned last week that I did think Juwan Jennings would be the priority play for us. A lot of the chalk ended up being on Brandon Ayuk as well, which made me get to Brandon Ayuk a little bit more. Just didn't want to be that underweight on the field. But heavily overweight on the field on Juwan Jennings. I ended up like 40% of him because he seemed like the most logical option to replace kind of the Deebo Samuel role as well. We did see kind of that ended up happening as well. Played a bunch of snaps. Expect him to play a bunch of snaps again in this game. Are we expecting 3 touchdowns again? No. Are we expecting 12 targets again? No. But if we can get 7 targets for 6 receptions, 60 yards at this cheap of a price tag, I absolutely love that as well. But I do think we want to begin to one or both of them because I think it's going to go a little bit ignored just how solid of a day Brandon Ayuk had besides having a solid day. What I mean by that is he played a lot as we'd expect, had 5 receptions, only 48 yards, and that was on 10 targets. And so if you would tell me that we're going to get 10 targets out of Brandon Ayuk at this cheap price tag as well, Deebo Samuel and George Kittle are going to be out again, assuming Brock Purdy's healthy, I love that as well. And so these two still seem to be some of the best value that we have on the slate. So I'm kind of okay going with both of them. At the same time, I don't exactly love targeting that matchup going against the Patriots. So some injury spots that we need to monitor is going to be with Keenan Allen for one. If he's out, DJ Moore and Rome Odunze both become great plays. They're both going to play around 95% of snaps. Both going to get some of the easy targets that we kind of saw Keenan Allen get in week 1. I do expect him to be out again this week just because it's typically a 3-week injury for him. Heck, he might end up sitting out another game as well just because he's an older player. And so looking at it, I would argue DJ Moore is a little bit too cheap for a guy that is playing 90% of the snaps and for a guy that has 28 targets on the year. I mean, that's pretty crazy. 10 targets the last 2 games as well. Very appealing there. And you get a matchup with the LA Rams, a matchup that I'm going to assume they're going to be playing from behind front because, well, the LA Rams offense, even though they're banged up, still being able to produce. So I really don't mind that. At the same time, Rome Odunze, also 11 targets. Like Caleb Williams looks terrible, don't get me wrong, but Rome Odunze still ended up with 100 receiving yards, 8 touchdown, kind of a long pass. And even if this game does end up being like a blowout, which I don't know if I exactly see that happening, like either way, I expect Rome Odunze to be on the field. So at that price tag, again, if Keenan Allen's out, that's certainly appealing. Now, another injury spot that we certainly need to monitor is going to be Tank Dell. If Tank Dell were to sit, that does increase, I think, the targets for Nico Collins, for Stephon Diggs, and then also probably Dalton Schultz as well. Those would all be 3 players I would want to get to a little bit more if we get news that Tank Dell is out. In terms of how Tank Dell is used, I would assume that production would go to more Stephon Diggs, maybe a couple more manufactured touches his way, but something I want to note. And then also Adam Thielen, he is gone to the IR. So that's going to mean we are going to continue to see that healthy workload go to Deontay Johnson. And shout out to the Carolina Panthers, an ugly stack of Andy Dalton, Deontay Johnson, and Adam Thielen ended up being my best lineup last week, which was a little bit funny, I would say, that worked out. But 14 targets then for Deontay Johnson, 100 receiving yards, a touchdown. Obviously, this offense was being held back by Bryce Young. I mentioned that a bunch, where there is touchdowns to be had, there's big plays to be had, and guess what? Andy Dalton saw those plays and made those plays. It's as simple as that. Like Bryce Young was trash, Andy Dalton came in and did what most NFL quarterbacks should be able to do. That's not anything to take away from Andy Dalton. That's more a testament to both Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. Now we have to worry about Adam Thielen being out. This could end up being maybe the same problem that we saw last year at the end of the season with Adam Thielen, where he ended up just kind of being the focal point of the offense, and the defense knew that, so they knew how to shut him down. I think Deontay Johnson's a little bit more talented than Adam Thielen, and I love the targets that we're going to get out of him. I want to chase those targets, and I am going to play him, but I'm a little bit concerned by that as well. For what's worth, Jonathan Mingo probably going to be the receiver number 2. They're certainly too cheap for that if he does end up being the receiver number 2. Played at like 68% of the snaps last week, maybe 65% of the snaps. I would assume that's only going to go up now with Adam Thielen out. We might see Leggett get some work, but I think it's going to be Mingo there as well. Great value. Great value. And then from there, I think it's worth calling out that Courtland Sutton was heavily involved again. 11 targets last week, 12 targets in week 1. Pittsburgh defense is pretty good for one, and Bo Nix played terribly in that game. So if we can just see Bo Nix kind of look a little bit better, I don't mind that. Like kind of a shoulder shrug play. If you end up on him, you're good with it. Same thing with Christian Kirk as well, who finally got involved. That was something that I thought would happen as well last week, where especially with Evan Ingram out, I thought in week 2 with Evan Ingram being out in warmups, you couldn't really change your game plan too much. And so we saw Brendan Strange still have a good game in week 3. in week 2. He actually did in week 3 as well. But I figured the game plan would then be to put an emphasis on getting Christian Kirk the football in week 3 because you have a full week to kind of develop your game plan around that. And that's what ended up happening. 10 targets, 8 receptions. I think this is going to be more of the norm, more of what we would expect. So I don't mind Christian Kirk at that price tag as well. If Jordan Love's in at quarterback, Christian Watson becomes in play as a GPP play. Obviously, someone that can catch a deep ball. I will say I was wrong about the snaps for the LA Rams receivers. To me, it kind of just seems like a stay away because of that. I thought it'd be Jordan Whittington. He actually played less snaps than he did in week 2. Darnell Mooney, a fine GPP play. Honestly, I want to touch on this real quick. I don't get the pricing difference between Mooney and Drake London. Like, based off of everything we've seen thus far, is it too much of a hot take to say Mooney's actually the receiver number 1 in this offense? Like, he's been the one that's been open the most. Don't get me wrong. Drake London's made some good plays. Had kind of I don't want to say a lucky late TD in week 2, but that TD was obviously set up by 2 really good Darnell Mooney plays. And as Kirk Cousins gets better and develops more and more chemistry with his receivers, I think that's going to only lead to Darnell Mooney being more of that receiver number 1 that he has been through the first 3 weeks. And again, I don't think that's really a hot take. Like, to me, guys, Darnell Mooney is just George Pickens without maybe the flair, if you will. Like, Mooney has been great. He really has. 8 targets, 7 targets. Again, if Cousins continues to look better like he has, that's just tough for me to imagine him not being more involved. And again, in week 1, guys, he was open a bunch. He was just not targeted when he was open. And that's not to take anything away from Drake London at all. I'm just saying the pricing should be tighter between those two. Maybe you could put Drake London at 5.8 and Darnell Mooney at 5.2. That would be correct to me. And then if we are looking for some value as well, Demario Douglas could end up being that value option for us. The coaching staff made a point of emphasis in saying that after week 2, they needed to get him the football. They needed to find ways to get him the football. That was true in 2 aspects. One, in targets, he ended up with 9 targets in the game, 7 receptions, ended up with 14.8 fantasy points, which was obviously huge. To me, the more important thing was that he was the clear receiver number 1 in the offense in terms of snaps, ended up playing 80% of the snaps, which in the previous 2 weeks had not been the case. It was like around 60%. So they figured out that they needed to get him on the field, and he's their top pass catcher, as we expected at the start of the season. So if that continues again, which would be the bet here, that does continue, then he would be a great value because then he should be able to at least get to 10 fantasy points at this price tag. I think it's worth pointing out Britton Covey also on the IR for the Eagles, so they could be without him, A.J. Brown, and also Devonta Smith. I mean, Jahan Dotson played 86% of the snaps last week as well. I don't know if we're really looking at him. Johnny Wilson would probably be someone that we're looking at, but you saw why Dallas Goedert ended up having like a big game. And we'll get into him in just a second. For what it's worth, Andre Oshivach, still too cheap. Trey Tucker, kind of a quietly great GPP play. He is someone that kind of is I'll put him in this category, Deshaun Jackson type play, where I know he's been out of the league for a while, but like Deshaun Jackson was a player that was so hit or miss. Like there's games in which he would put up 5 fantasy points, 8 fantasy points, and then go for 30. Like that was just him. That was the nature of Deshaun Jackson, a big play type player. Think of maybe Trey Tucker as Rashid Shaheed. Trey Tucker's playing a lot. He is a big play receiver as well. He ended up making those big plays last week. Ended up being on the field a lot. They like him there, clearly. And at this price tag, he's certainly too cheap, certainly someone you should be looking at in GPPs, even in a difficult matchup going against the Cleveland Browns. And then lastly here, guys, I know I'm spending a lot of time on the receivers as well. There's a lot to cover, right? It's week 4, a decent amount of stuff to cover. I want to talk about the values that we could be on for them. So Devon Valet was someone that, if you guys have followed this channel, I've talked up a decent amount. He was someone that I was going to be on last week as well. Ended up not working out, ended up not being able to play him. Forget who I switched to. Covey was one of them. And I forget the other value. The other value actually ended up doing decently. Anyways, obviously he had a pretty good game in week 1. Okay, he got injured. Reports are kind of suggesting that he sat out this week as well because of those injuries. Still, like they're like, why risk it? So we actually saw Humphrey get a lot of work in that game as well. And we saw him get a decent amount of work in week 2 as well in replacement of Valet. He actually played the second most snaps of any receiver as well. So if we get news that Valet is sitting, Humphrey would be the play. If we get news that Valet is playing, I would assume he would be the play. But I just want to bring this up because these two players are definitely too cheap. This could be a very cheap 3x option for us, especially if you're someone that really loves your build, let's say, and you're closing out your build with a flex or something like that. These two players, other than maybe Jonathan Mingo, are going to be, obviously, make sure who's ever active and starting, but one of these two are going to be really great values on the slate. All right, so from there, let's go ahead and pivot on into the tight end position. And at the tight end position, one of my biggest mistakes in regards to the 95 lineup builder on Sunday was the fact that it was telling me to play as much Dallas Goedert as I can as possible. And I'm like, no, we'll only do 20% or like 25%. Typically, I do like a max of 35 or 40 as my first run, just to see what the 95 lineup builder likes. And yeah, I love Dallas Goedert. So that was a mistake I had last week. And he's going to be someone we're probably looking at again. The thing with Goedert is he had a massive game. He was clearly the focal point of the game plan. Had a couple of big plays due to play design as well, which with the injuries this week, I just don't see that happening again. And so I feel like people are going to like try to target him because they missed out on him last week, and they're going to make that argument. Devonta Smith is out, AJ Brown's out, Covey's out. They don't have anyone to throw to. He's going to get a massive target share. That could be true. I just worry that the tight end position is probably the easiest to scheme away for a defense to be able to do, especially when there are no other pass catching weapons in the offense. So I worry that he's going to be a little bit too high owned. Then we got to deal with all these injuries. Like, geez, Trey McBride, if he's out, his backup, Higgins, would be fine. Like, would be fine with him as an option. I definitely wouldn't mind it. George Kittle, if he's out, we are just probably looking at Eric Sobert again. He did what we would want him to do. He still had a cheap price tag. Like, he ended up with 6.1 fantasy points. I would love to grab that again. And like, I'm kind of fine putting him into my builds. But again, like, I don't know if I want to be targeting that many Niners in a build. So I don't know if we need to go there. Another kind of clear-cut tight end play in terms of value is Tommy Tremble. So looking at it, guys, they are going to be without Adam Thielen. We already know that. Tommy Tremble is someone that was banged up to start the season, missed week 1, didn't play that many snaps in week 2, and then in week 3 did end up playing a decent amount of snaps. We saw him play 86% of the snaps in week 3. And he is a younger guy, but like in a game that was kind of a blowout, you would have expected maybe Sanders, the rookie tight end, to get a little bit more work. That did not happen. Okay, so Tommy Tremble at 2.7, $200 off the min, a guy that scored 5 fantasy points plus the last 2 weeks. I love targeting that. And so we got 2 great values. I'm going to continue to punt the tight end position until the tight end position tells me to spend up on it. That just seems to be the theme thus far this season. Now, that being said, there are some other plays that we can get to. Like Tyler Conklin, guys, is basically not leaving the field. Obviously had a big game last week. I would say that is more of what I expected out of him. Obviously, I don't expect him to be like averaging 14 fantasy points per game, but like around 8 in this offense. Like, I don't hate him as a play. It's not bad. Johnny Mund is someone I'm still looking at. Hasn't had a big game yet. I mean, scored a touchdown, got pretty lucky with that touchdown last week. I think that's part of the equation, though. Strange would be someone you're looking at. Again, if Evan Ingram's out, he's been productive, but a lot of that's due to scoring a touchdown. Tucker Kraft is still someone I like a lot, guys. 3 targets in that game, 4.4 fantasy points. The thing with Tucker Kraft is he clearly looks talented at the tight end position. Clearly looks like if that was the way Matt LaFleur chooses to attack this Minnesota defense. Tucker Kraft, assuming he's healthy, he was in and out of the game last week because he was citing a little bit of injury, but he could have a massive game. I don't want to say he could have a Dallas Goedert type game, but like if Matt LaFleur chooses to attack Minnesota with the tight end position, Tucker Kraft could have a big game. And I phrase it that way because you look at how they beat the Tennessee Titans, it was a little bit different than how the Packers beat the Indianapolis Colts. And that's just where Matt LaFleur sees the weakness. But again, Jordan Love might be back. That would only help Tucker Kraft as well. And then from there, Foster Moreau as well. If we get news that Taysom Hill is out again, I don't mind him. Like, Moreau played a lot of snaps in that game. It was an ugly game. Okay, only 2 targets in the game, 1.2 receptions. Clearly don't love that. And I don't think we need to go there with the 2 other value tight end plays that are there, but I did want to mention him. He is someone that played a lot of snaps. So from there, we're going to get into the quarterback position. Honestly, this feels a lot like last week where it was just kind of, all right, whoever you end up on, you're kind of good with it. I would say that the plays I want to go out of my way to target are going to be really, I don't think we need to spend the extra money to get to Stroud or Hurts. Let's just go with Kyler Murray in a great matchup going against Washington. Sadly, locking in 15 fantasy points as a floor hasn't been bad this year, so I don't mind him there. Joe Burrow is probably going to be the quarterback play I end up on because of the matchup and because, well, they're in kind of desperate mode. He's going to go out firing. I'd love getting to Joe Burrow, but we also have Jaden Daniels there as well. I kind of worried that, again, it's a short week for a rookie quarterback coming in off of kind of a high of winning a Monday Night Football game as well. And I kind of worried that people are going to have confirmation bias or recency bias, I guess, after watching that game, after watching him really look good, score a rushing touchdown. And so, and you get a good matchup. And so he is someone that if the ownership gets too high, I'm not going to say I'm going to fade, but I am monitoring that because I do think we got a pretty simple swap. If Daniels is the highest owned quarterback on the slate, you can easily just get to Burrow or Murray. Both plays are similar plays, both plays that I really like as well. For what it's worth, guys, Deshaun Watson continues to get points rushing the football. I do think that's noteworthy. Not something we're going crazy with. Andy Dalton did look good. Kind of worry about him with Adam Thielen out, but like worth a shot in GPPs to like maybe run out a stack. And that's kind of it for me. You see that we're going to have a lot of salary left over here. There's a lot of value out there. You can really make whichever line of pass you want work. Again, in terms of defenses that I'll be going out of my way to target, probably just the Patriots. Again, with the Niners being so banged up, I just don't see the Patriots going negative. And at 2.4, I'd rather just play for a defense that's going to give me 3 fantasy points than pay up $900 for a defense that might give me 7. That way I can maybe afford to pay up for someone else in this situation. Let's see who we can get up to from Brian Ayuk. Let's go Jamar Chase. I'm perfectly happy to do that. We get a Joe Burrow stack. Don't exactly love the Joe Burrow with Zach Moss stack there, and also Jamar Chase. But I think this works out. I think this is a great first look build. We'll see how it adjusts throughout the week. But with that, guys, let's go ahead and run the lineup optimizer just once, see what that is spitting out to us. And so again, I just want to reiterate that this is Tuesday. The projections will be updating more throughout the week. A lot of the projections are based off of how Vegas sees the game going. I would contribute a lot of the success that the data has had to kind of the projections in general. The projections are going to be stronger later on in the week, obviously. But I think it's a good look. So to run this, we just have to give it 2 data points to go off of. I do want to put flex and eligible on the settings, and then we're just going to run this. I just want to see what the top builds are. Last week, strangely enough, while this is loading, Bo Nix was in one of the builds, and I was like, what? So yeah, guys, it is going more of a, I don't hate this. Like Daniels, Bijan Robinson, Hall, Mooney, Tutu Atwell, who, I mean, kind of was the one for them. I don't know if I need to go out of my way to target that. Michael Wilson, I don't hate as a value as well. I just prefer some of the other players I mentioned. Dallas Goedert, it is getting to. J.K. Dobbins, I just don't see it, guys. I feel like he's being vastly overvalued. I'd rather get to any of those other running backs that I mentioned, but interesting to note. Let's see the ownerships. Michael Wilson, Dallas Goedert, Jaden Daniels, a lot of. Breece Hall, a lot of. Bijan Robinson, a lot of. Deontay Johnson, a lot of. Darnell Mooney, a lot of. Again, I'm not going to be that high on J.K. Dobbins or Chuba Hubbard, but interesting to see that. All right, that's going to be all for this video. If you guys want access to that 9-to-5 lineup builder, to the NFL DFS cheat sheet as well, head on over to 9to5sports.com. Get access to all that for just $10 a month. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel as well. All right, good luck this week. And as always, let's keep cashing.